Hey, learned a new thing here, so let's try to talk about the Eastern Front. This is the Eastern Front. This is the invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22nd, 1941. If you recall, the Germans lost the Battle of Britain to the British, namely because the British had radar and they were receiving tremendous amounts of lend-lease from the United States. Hitler then turned his attention to the Soviet Union. And if you recall from some things we mentioned in Mein Kampf, something called Lebensraum, which was living space. So Hitler wanted living space for the German people, and that was going to be in Eastern Europe. So he invades the Soviet Union. The invasion is massive. It's in 3 army groups. So I'll go with my laser pointer here, see how it works. So here is one invasion army, numbering about 1.5 million soldiers. This one also has about 1.5 million soldiers, and this army, German army, has about 1.5 million soldiers. It's a massive invasion involving close to 4 million, over 4 million German soldiers, 3,500 tanks, thousands of planes. The Russians are caught with their proverbial pants down. They have decapitated during the Great Purge most of their leadership, so they're in dire straits. They begin surrendering slowly. The objective here is to knock the Soviet Union out of the war and to also gain control of the vast oil fields and the Crimean and the Black Sea areas down in here, which the Germans desperately needed. This right out here will be right where you can see that cursor. That's the Battle of Stalingrad. This line will extend out here in the Battle of Stalingrad. That's the subject of one of the movies I sent for you. Maybe you can check it out. It's an amazing movie. Now, the Russians will halt the Germans at this line primarily because they're going to bring about 500,000 elite Russian soldiers from the Eastern Front. They were concerned that Japan might attack them. So they finally have no choice. And in December of 1941, they're going to bring some soldiers in here to halt the German advance. Uh, you know, this is where the Nazis will set up all their concentration camps and death camps, which that'll be the subject of a separate video that comes out maybe later this week. A couple things worth mentioning here. We have the Battle of Leningrad, which formerly was a city called St. Petersburg. It's up here. It was a site of a huge the German siege of Leningrad. It was savage fighting. People reduced to mass starvation. I already mentioned the battle out here of Leningrad, or Stalingrad, I'm sorry, which, that'll be something you can check out in that movie if you like. That was one of the biggest battles of World War II. And also the Battle of Kursk is going to be the largest tank battle of World War II, involving about 5,000 tanks. Now, interestingly about tanks, the Germans had some fantastic tanks. They had the Panzer tank, and then they started making the Panther tank. Great tanks. However, the Russians, when they were retreating, moved all their factories back behind the Ural Mountains, right up in this area, even further back. And they could start constructing tanks and their weapons. So the Germans couldn't get a hold of these factories, and they constructed something called the T-34 tank. It was one of the best tanks of all of World War II. And that helped stop the Germans, and eventually the Russians on the Eastern Front will begin pushing the Germans all the way back across Eastern Europe, back into Germany, right? So this is the high water mark, really, of the German advance, and it's going to fall short of Moscow, short of their objectives. It's important that you know that this was done for German living space. 80% of the casualties of World War II will be on the Eastern Front, right? This is where most of the dying and fighting in World War II was going to take place. The Soviet Union received tremendous amounts of American lend-lease supplies, much like the British did during the Battle of Britain, which is also going to be a key factor in keeping the Russians in the war. So that's the Eastern Front. Learning some new technology here. Anyway, your assignment is to watch this video, and then I want you to, on Schoology, I'm going to have a spot for you. You're going to tell me something you learned about the video, something you liked about the video, something about the war on the Eastern Front. I've hit a couple things here which are significant. I'm trying to keep the videos down, and that is it. So I'm going to attempt to stop the video.